I'll call this meeting of the Fiscal Advisory Committee to order. Welcome back to everyone for our second meeting. We'll start with the roll call, starting at the end with Mr. Flynn.
Michael Flynn, Superintendent.
Jane Smart, Business Administrator.
Richard Tripp, Fiscal Advisory Board.
Jody Nelson, Fiscal Advisory Committee.
Marissa Russo-Stitt, Fiscal Advisory Committee.
Jenna Paradise, School Board Secretary.
Jamie Carew, School Board.
Jason McLeod, School Board.
Michael Thiel, School Board Chair.
Jen Thoreau, School Board Vice Chair.
Ben Cohn, alternate.
Derek Anderson, Fiscal Advisory Committee. Anthony Henry, Fiscal Advisory Committee.
Jim Dietzel, alternate member, Fiscal Advisory Committee.
Tom Carden, Fiscal Advisory.
Elizabeth Coughlin, Fiscal Advisory. Brenda Willis, School Board.
Karen Rand.
All right, thank you, everybody. I think we had a productive meeting 2 weeks ago. I thought it was very valuable to hear from each of the building principals and the needs for their buildings. We've never done that before in these meetings. I hope everyone was able to get their first round of questions into the administration. Everyone's feeling good coming into tonight. So for the agenda tonight, we're going to hear about what makes up the rest of the budget, which is really your two primary drivers of the budget, and that's personnel and enrollment for our tuition high school students. In a typical year, the salary and benefits for the district staff makes up over 50% of the budget. Then the tuition and special ed costs for Pinkerton students make up another 30. So that's 80 or so percent of your budget right there before we even get off the ground. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, everybody. So just to recap where we've been and what we've been working on, specifically in my new time here in Derry, it's been only 4 months. So I know I've referenced that before at board meetings, but I'd also like to reference it here. So as we start to navigate probably a little bit more discussion amongst the group on where we want to go or what we want to do, I want to reiterate that my job as the superintendent is to make proposals and also make recommendations on funding something or not funding something. So you'll see this evening that I've already made recommendations, or we've worked through Jane on reducing some of the requests from a couple weeks ago. Why now? Well, as the other numbers continued to become finalized, it became apparent that some of the requests or asks were going to be not beneficial at this time while we're trying to make a fiscally responsible budget. So with that, an example was going to be the lunch tables. So we were able to work through, and Jane can discuss it a little bit more in detail, a different avenue for supporting the purchase of lunch tables, cafeteria tables. We have a surplus in our food service line that we are required to only be allowed to carry so much money. And in talking with Jane and how you spend that down, lunch tables are going to qualify. So we were able to remove those from the request immediately. Some of the other requests, we need to make sure, as I said a couple weeks ago, the approach wasn't always, and I'm going to pick on Mr. Fox again, the approach wasn't to increase his budget by $180,000, whatever it may or may not be. The purpose of the request were to put it on the record that even though we may remove it from this year, it's going to return as a continued request. It's important to emphasize that this community has supported multiple things, and we're going to talk about it tonight. The community supported a new teacher's contract. The community supported a bond. Those are voted on and approved in the budget. So when we're discussing the budget, Michael did a great job of discussing 50% salaries and benefits, 30% special education. You also have to understand, and that's what we're going to try and get you to this evening, is the 90% of the increases are going to be worth a discussion that required by law, voted on and approved by the community, and things we need to operate, utilities, things along those lines. So as you start to get into these discussions or wherever the conversation may go, remember that the hefty part of tonight is required, okay? So thank you to Mr. Tripp, Jamie, Jason. I think that's about the three we heard from in regards to questions. We compiled a list. We're going to navigate some of those through this presentation. And also we can report out or give you some individual answers, Mr. Tripp, as we work through the next week or so. So as a refresher, we're starting to check some boxes here. You have September. Our first budget meeting was in October. We're now here at the second budget meeting as we navigate this budgeting process. Since our last meeting, this is, I said this quietly, but it's very challenging to budget for special education. So since we last met, we have an anticipated change of placement. So with that comes incurred costs of roughly $150,000 per placement. We are in the process, and I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, and working on a frequently asked question document for the community and the board, as well as a special education detailed handout in regards to why placements cost what they are. Since then, also, we have level funded the maintenance improvement plan. We had told you that Jeremy was basically presenting about $750,000 that we knew were going to move towards the capital improvement plan. Now, that discussion is currently happening at the facilities level facility committee level, and we thought it was reasonable immediately with the increases that are happening in other areas to pull that completely out and move that discussion back into facilities. So leaving some of that in here, and we'll get to it in a second, we left some of it in there, but more importantly, we took the bulk or the long-term projects out, and we discussed it today at Finance about creating a revolving maintenance trust to continue to fund that so that it's not in the budget, right? So it's a separate article that the community gets to vote on whether they would like to support or not, but we can talk about that more. And then the other part is what you're going to see is the request is we pulled everything out that the principals had requested, specifically furniture, the large driver costs. But what we'd really like to do is bring the supplies levels back to the 24-25 school year. So last year through the process, those were stripped from the buildings. That was a decision made previously, but I would like to bring that back to the level so that it becomes a predictable cost. That's our goal here, year over year, to be predictable, and the large swings either be protected by a trust or articulated clearly that it's in a 3, 5 year, 10-year plan. You don't want costs just coming out of nowhere, or where did that come from? Why did we need this? We really want to level set so that the community, and more importantly, the taxpayer, knows where their dollars are going. So those are some of the changes since the last time we saw you. With that, we are at salaries and benefits. So to emphasize, last year on the ballot was a new teacher's contract. And that was voted on and approved by the community. And Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, the anticipated warrant article was, well, about 1.5, 1.6, somewhere around there, and it's come in roughly a little bit under. So that's a great job by the business department in trying to project what it would be a year later from when you're implementing. The other thing that we got locked in, well, I think we communicated this before, is the health rate increase is at 7.4. So that is, this is going to sound crazy because I say it all the time, that's a great thing. It's interesting when we're talking ourselves into a great increase of 7.4. To put it in perspective, surrounding communities on the same type of in health trust have seen 20, 25, 29% increases in their healthcare costs. So we have come in at 7.4, dental at 4. So there you can see those become the differences in regards to not just the teacher's contract, but also learned today that we only have 2 bargaining units comparatively to other districts I came from. We had 4 or 5. So all of those salaries and benefits include front office, include food service, custodial, all employees, not just teachers, but emphasizing that part of that adjustment, or a significant part of it, is that approved teacher's contract. Questions? Thanks, Jen. All right, Jane is going to take this slide.
Okay, so I'm going to take this slide because when we were talking about how we're budgeting Pinkerton and our projections, and I have recently talked about the current year, we actually have more students than we projected. And if you remember, when we were working through the budget process last year, we reduced about 40 students from the original projection amount based on historical numbers of the numbers of students who move on, move out, graduate early, go to a different district. So what I wanted to do, because there is such an increase in the budget, and that's mainly because I went back to taking our original amount of students, so graduating all our current 8th graders and promoting our 9th, 10th, 11th. And Pinkerton also has what they call 5-year plus students who have to take a different path, take them a little longer to get their high school diploma. And using that number for our projections, mainly because this year what we found, we just did an analysis and took our 8th graders who graduated from Derry in June, compared them to the students who are enrolled in Pinkerton currently, and 19 of those kids never went to Pinkerton in September or enrolled. So they went off to somewhere else. 31 students joined Pinkerton that weren't, as freshmen, who were not Derry student 8th graders in June. So, and then we had 6 students who never unenrolled, eventually came off of our enrollment sometime in September, but they didn't not enroll in Pinkerton until the time that Pinkerton actually had to unenroll them. So we know that there are students who are leaving us and going somewhere else, moving, whatever it could be. But then there is an influx of students who others have brought to our attention, that they know people who are doing a charter school until 8th grade and then deciding to participate at Pinkerton for their 9th grade. So we're going to actually reach out to their registrar with the list of the students that I see those move-ins and find out where we think they're coming from so we can closely identify. So by doing that, if you look at this chart, what we're trying to do is, in the past, we have had, even though we've even reduced the number of students projected, we've still come in under budget. And if you can look at, I've been tracking this for the purpose of this since 17-18. And what I want to show you, in the first year of 17-18, you have, there were no changes. The board, when we were doing the budget process, did not reduce any additional students. And you can see the number of students that we were still under budget. Again, moving into 18-19, we had actually added 15 students and had a surplus. In 19-20, you can see that there really wasn't much change, but it's the one time in the beginning where we had more students than were budgeted, and that was at the February billing. So in this chart, we get billed 3 times a year from Pinkerton: October, February, and April. So this bar graph for each one of those fiscal years are the 3 times that we're billed during that year. And so you can see the fluctuation in the number of students. Then we get to 2021, the board approved reducing the projected enrollment by 30, same in 21-22, 22-23, and then in 23-24, we reduced it by 55, and then in 24-25, 55, and then for 25-26, we reduced by 40, and we came in with 42. So what we're looking at is, we don't want to have a spike where we're looking at right now, and we're thinking that it is possible that we are getting, 31 students seems like a lot that weren't enrolled with us for the 8th grade last year. So we have to take those students into consideration, and we don't know, because if we just historically track the trend, you can see that we typically have a surplus, although we've been getting much tighter on our projections that you could see since 22-23. It's closer to that trend, but considering that we're about 42 over right now, I think Mike and I, when we looked at it, thought that we should be budgeting our students who are graduating and then promoting everybody and not taking any reductions, thinking that students are going to leave, because what we're seeing this year is we're adding students. Even though some are leaving, We're gaining more than we're losing.
Yeah, any questions? Any questions on the trend line? Mr. Tripp?
So we are effectively short on our budget for Pinkerton.
We are upside down right now in Pinkerton after the first bill.
All right, could you estimate what the amount is?
Jane has a good ballpark.
So if we were to take based on the first billing, it's around 700,000. However, we received the bill in beginning of October, and since that time, Mike gets updates weekly of any changes in enrollment, and we already have multiple students who are no longer enrolled. So we know that number is going to change. So we're going to be watching that every month.
So for the first billing, we were 700,000 over budget,
Projected.
right? And you expect that to decrease on its own?
Well, if we look at our trends, typically the number of students that are not enrolled increases from the October billing to the June billing. Now, sometimes, again, that's students who are enrolled at Pinkerton currently and they just haven't completed they didn't complete their junior or senior year English class, or they're short some credits, and they're going to complete in December. Or they transition to the high set, which is the GED program. So there's a variety of reasons that you can just tell by the trends. The number of students that are not enrolled from October to June increases. Well, it says April, but we know it goes to the end of the school.
I'm learning in my short time here that the Pinkerton projections are challenging, to say the least. And the goal of this trend line was to show how conservative 10 years ago the board was. So, 17, 18, they made 0 changes to the projections that this administration had put forward. And then a few years in a row, they continued to reduce the projection. And then you're starting to see specifically in the 23, 24, 24, 25 that those numbers the delta becomes a lot smaller. The challenging part for us this year being upside down, which we haven't seen since 1920, as we're moving forward, one of the things that I am unable to do is come back and ask for more money, right? So once it's voted on and approved, depending on how it goes, I cannot come back and ask the town for more money. So it's this approach of this committee and the school board specifically on how do we want to continue this trend. Is this a one-off year? I'm not sure, meaning the personal example that was shared at finance was a neighbor was at a charter school K through 8 and then enrolled in Pinkerton this year. The EFAs are allowing other families to access something different than public education, maybe K through 8, and then they're coming back to Pinkerton. I can't sit here confidently and tell you what the trend is. Is this a one-off, or should we be conservative approach and take all of our 8th graders and move them up rather than a reduction? That's one of the areas for discussion. It is, I wish there was a science. I am going to work on it because that first bill is very challenging for us as a district. Specifically, I applaud Jane's team on doing the data dive on 19 not showing up at Pinkerton. Where'd they go, right? They don't have to communicate with us because they're done with us. So they have to communicate with Pinkerton because they're their students. So do they go to Trinity? Do they go to Central Catholic? Do they go to these avenues? And because they're technically graduating from Derry, is there a misstep there in regards to enrollment in the next district? So we've seen a gap of 15, 18, 21 days of students not reporting that they may have started at Central Catholic. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I think that's a gap in the system of a transition of really leaving the Derry School District. And we're a customer of Pinkerton versus now they're a customer of Central Catholic. That's one of the analogies I'm using. Sorry, Jason.
That's okay. Are we only finding out when we get the bill, or is Pinkerton communicating the changes in enrollment?
So we're working on that process. we found out, are the trends through the first bill. And then more recently, as I've been added to this withdrawal thing that comes in, I've been getting updates every week now. So I don't know if that was a gap in my transition. I don't want to grandstand or anything like that, but that was definitely a...
But we're good now, is what you're saying?
Yes.
You're getting updates?
Yes.
Great, okay. Thank you.
And as a note, so when we do get that first bill for October, they're billing us for 90 days. So they're just anticipating that everybody's going to stay for the 90 days. But what it also showed on the bill is those students who hadn't unenrolled yet. So some of them, their district that they moved to finally got the records request, and so they only attended 4 days, or they attended 7 days. And from the first billing until the next one in February, if students are unenrolled, then they're only billing them from, if they left November 1, they're billing us from, they'll give us a credit for when they left in October and only stayed till November, then they credit us for that student from November until the bill in February.
So things that we're already trying to be proactive about rather than just expecting different results. I lived through this at Timberlane. So at Timberlane Middle School, when my kids would, we lost in that region too to some of, I keep using Central Catholic because it's an easy one. So I would have had 8th graders. But I created an exit form essentially for our 8th graders. So same thing here. We need to create some type of exit form for our 8th graders. Like, do you anticipate leaving? Are you, not solid answers, but at least it's more of a data point so that we can be a little bit more proactive in the approach of the start of a school year. We're trying to improve that communication process between us as an exiting school district to them as the customer. So.
I'm wondering, well, that's loud. An exit form may or may not be filled out if they're leaving or not anticipating leaving, but we know that 8th graders will sign up for their courses, I believe, in February for their 9th grade year, so we could compare who's signed up for courses and who's not, and compared to our 8th grade records, it might be a second check to that.
Hi. Do we know how many 8th graders, EFA 8th graders last year went to Pinkerton?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is we, in our sending town superintendent's district meeting, we're really trying to navigate the EFA reports. They're very, we recently received an easier way to access that, so we're going to be able to do a little bit of that moving forward.
Thank you.
It's not a simple report to get to. And we also don't have to be notified if they access it. That's another thing we've run into, I can be honest here, is we're running into what the state is calling fraud. So families are accessing the EFAs, and then they're using the money towards what you're able to do, but then they're still accessing, they were still accessing one of our programs. So the state got involved, they talked to that family. So people are still navigating how to appropriately use the EFA. So there's a couple things there still that are new to districts.
I have a question. When is it that students commit to Pinkerton from a school? Is it when they sign up for their classes in February or January, or is there a later date that's the official commitment? Because I'm wondering if there's some way that we can partner with Pinkerton in that they can also advertise, like, please let your previous school district know that you're exiting, like, some way for them to collect that data at that point, that either the parents of the family or the guardians of the family can contact us to give us numbers saying that they're going into it and they are a Derry resident, or Pinkerton can compile those numbers there and then therefore send them to us in some regards.
Yeah, to Derek's point, I mean, they require all kids to fill out a schedule regardless if they're attending Pinkerton or not, specifically in February, just because of the massive onboarding. At my superintendent's sending meeting, I was asking, Hooksett, because they have multiple options of which they can go, right? It's not just Pinkerton. So they're getting real data because the student has to choose which avenue they're going. Ours is Pinkerton or Next. That's our data. So in partnering with them, I mean, there's eighth graders that they make changes to their life daily, but more importantly, it's like, are you going to Pinkerton or not? It's going to be a weird way to feel them out because they can make that change at any point. But if you're getting the greatest number, you feel better. 40 was like, whoa, that's a big off. How do we prepare moving forward? And we talked about it at several committee levels on outreach forms. It just helps us so that we can prepare. And we're calculating for, think about it, next year. There was a couple hands up, Michael.
Well, I mean, to the point about we have 31 students who said that, showed up at Pinkerton this year that were not on our radar at all. They did not go to our middle schools. We really didn't know that they were out there. So, yeah, I mean, that's the hardest thing to anticipate. We can't pull somebody if we don't know that they exist.
And we're required to pay the tuition. So I just want to.
Yeah, it's exactly.
I know, I
it's
have
our
to say
public
it out
school
loud.
of record.
Yes.
So anybody can show up anytime at Pinkerton, and we're paying for them to go there.
Yeah.
if they're
I mean,
a Derry
this affects
resident.
our busing too. Depending on how many kids all of a sudden come in, we're talking about the possibility of additional busing or additional routes. So this is kind of a trickle down. It doesn't sound like 40 kids is a big deal, but it certainly could be.
$700,000.
Yeah.
And Tim's been great. Since I've been here, I've been asking a lot of new questions, or maybe they're not new to him, and he's been awesome. He's like, we should work on that. Let's set up a meeting to talk about that. So it's really trying to narrow the lens because it has such a significant impact on us financially. The other sending towns don't send the amount of students we do. So their swings of 5 or 10 are far more appeasable to a budgeting process than 40, 30, 15, 20. So he's been great. We're going to work on it, but we're trying to get there.
Do we know how many, if any, of those kids came from the new builds in Derry?
We don't know where any of the kids come. It's not our students. So as they register or where their previous school was, that goes to Pinkerton because they're the enrolled school district.
Thank you.
Okay, so to emphasize this slide or this discussion point, it really is, I'm learning that one of the bigger swings that this committee and the board really talks about is how many students do we fund for Pinkerton. So we went on the conservative approach of just leaving it level of whatever amount of eighth graders we have, we move that forward. That's our recommendation at this time. Okay? All right. So before we get to what everyone's here for, the bottom line budget, is I want to point out where we are, or when you see the increase of the $11 million, you can see where the significance came from, right? So let's put salaries aside, because that includes everybody. That's all, how many employees? 600. So that's all 600 employees. Pinkerton tuition, required. We have to pay for our kids to go to Pinkerton. The bond entrance, voted on and approved. That kicks in, have to pay for it. Special education, required by law. This is another one that I'll continue to bang the drum on. The state has been put forward several good bills, whether it's funding special education as a whole, whether they increase the percentage. Those continue to get pulled back, but that would be a game changer for us, as you're well aware of the amount of the total. Special education out of district, to reiterate, we do everything possible. Derry does a phenomenal job. We have embedded programs within our schools to keep our students in our community before that placement takes place. They do a great job. Since I've been here, there have been students that were fringe, and they're still here because we've been able to wrap our arms around them. That also coincides with staffing. First student bus contract, required by law. Next charter school, part of the agreement. And then the NEC program, special education. So salaries aside, if you take away the 3.7, it's nearly 8 of it required there. Then the teacher's contract is 1.5, so that gets you to 9.5. So when you get to this slide and you see the difference, I know Mr. Tripp and Derek were talking about inflation and the percentage change. If you subtract the $8 or $9 million roughly from the increases, we're proposing essentially a $2 million increase, which is about 1.5%, 2%. I'm trying to break it down opposite because numbers are frightening, but more specifically going back to what is required and what is a driver. The discussion here, when we get to it, we've removed the $15,000 table or the walkie-talkies to try. The SAFE grant came out. Sorry, I meant to mention that on Monday. The SAFE grant was released by the state of New Hampshire, so we're going to be applying for upgraded walkie-talkies, upgraded cameras. We removed all of the things that we feel like we can control out of it to level it to supplies and then discuss these increases. If we're getting into discussions, which we're in a second, we need to think about it's going to be salaries and benefits and tuition to Pinkerton, and then I have some other ideas. This district, we mentioned it briefly at finance this morning in regards to creating trusts, right? So in Hopkinton, we had a special education trust. So it's a separate warrant article. You can put a warrant article for $150,000, which would cover a swing of a student in or out, right? It gives you that protection piece, and it's raised and appropriated not through the general budget. So there's different avenues to try and attack it. I don't know the community, this appetite yet, because as I've been working through with Jane and Joe in the department, default keeps coming up in the discussion, so I'm interested to see where that falls tonight. But I just wanted to refocus everyone on what is the drivers of where we are and how we got there. So any questions before we talk about enrollment and then Jane's one printout that she has in front of you? Mr. Tripp.
All right, so the numbers that are on this slide, these are the increases in, say, like the district salaries is 3.7 million?
Overall, between all 600 employees, yes.
Okay, so...
Salary and benefits.
Salary and benefits.
Okay, so, all right. Well, there was no descriptor at the top of the table, so I had to ask that.
Okay. And the teacher's contract is embedded in that number. So the 1.5 that was projected on the warrant article is projected in there.
So we're anticipating getting, what's the total of these numbers? Oh, all right.
That's the bottom line budget you were asking for.
So we're getting a increase of approximately $11 million.
All right, I'm going to direct you. Joe, do you mind talking about enrollment since it's kind of been your, I'll call it your baby?
Sure. We talked very briefly about it last time we met, and I gave you some rough numbers. I think there is a handout that kind of lays out our enrollment projections. These are projections, so the biggest mysteries to us are kindergarten and first grade. Those are the ones that are difficult to know sort of just based on the cohort status. So I'll come back to those in a second, but the numbers that we projected for grades 2 through 8, we're using the cohort model where we're promoting students up. We know that's imperfect, but it's borne out to be pretty close. So we have not seen, and I don't know if this gets back to Jody's question earlier about new builds and things. We haven't seen an uptick in enrollment at the K-8 level, so I don't know that there would be an uptick in enrollment at the high school level that is driven by simply new builds or things like that. I don't have that demographic information. So right now, this chart can be a little overwhelming sometimes because there's so many sets of data here, but the things that I guess I want you to focus on are we just simply promoted our grade 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. When it comes to kindergarten to first grade, we typically see a jump because kindergarten is not mandatory in the state of New Hampshire. So there are a number of children, and we don't necessarily always know how many that are in private kindergartens or that are not in kindergarten. So we typically cannot rely on simply just promoting students from kindergarten to first grade to get a number. So you'll see those numbers are slightly higher than the previous, like the first grade number is about 20 or so students higher than what we currently have in kindergarten district-wide. As I said before, kindergarten is also difficult to project. We have set a class size cap at 18 for kindergarten. So what we did is we took a look at what we have for kindergarten classrooms. I believe there's 17 of them. And we assumed full enrollment in all 17 classrooms, which gives us a number of about 300, well, gives us a number of 306. We've been right around the 300 number for kindergarten enrollment for the last several years. This year we're down a little bit. In fact, as of yesterday, I think we had 275 students in kindergarten. So that's a little bit lower than we had previously. Questions? Again, also at the top, where you see the school names and then you see the grades, that number that's next to the grade is the school board goal or cap goal for class size. The number of classrooms or the number of regular ed classrooms, that's also a gauge that we look at. So for context, we reduced 2 regular ed classrooms. Last year, we went from 84 regular ed classrooms to 82 regular ed classrooms. This is continuing with 82 regular ed classrooms at the elementary level, K4, and then maintaining the team structures that we have at the intermediate and the middle school. So the intermediate are either 2 or 3 person teams, depending on the grade, and at the middle school are 4 person teams. The chart you were looking at in terms of classroom teacher numbers, these are all regular ed numbers. These don't account for special programs, special educators, related service providers, things like that. Folks have questions?
Questions on enrollment? Okay, so I am going to finally point you to this magic sheet that Jane calls the Bible. Is that close? All right. This is what I've been working off with her more specifically. So you see approved 25, 26, default 26, 27, proposed 26, 27, delta, so over under of the default, and then the increase over 25, 26 in percentages. So what I'd really like to draw you to first is the increase. So it's kind of what I spoke to on this slide here. So if you start at increase over 25, 26, and you go down that column to the blue line, it says Derry subtotal. So that is 7.7. So Pinkerton aside, 7.7 is the request, and we spoke about where the drivers are coming from. So salaries and benefits, special education, student services, bus contract, utilities, that's where that number, that baseline comes in. So you can go on to the over-under. What you can see is the default as projected, the difference, including Pinkerton, is $472,000 over. So with our reductions from the CIP, the buildings, and some of the other things that we mentioned, the difference between default currently and what's projected is about $472,000. Now, this is where I don't know any of you well enough yet to see, is that good, bad, indifferent? Am I crazy? Am I not crazy? I know last year in my research when I was doing the interview process, there was a difference of $1 in regards to budgeting and default. I know I'm new here, but I would advise that we do something a little bit different there to allow the voters a little bit more of a choice than $1. Whether it's above or below, I'm indifferent. So at least allowing the voter an opportunity to make a decision whether we're going to die on a hill presenting $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. I know I'm being dramatic right now, but if we're going to present over, or if it's the appetite of this committee and the board to say, Mike, you and Jane need to get it down under. I would really like to start to produce something with a little bit more of an option so that the voters can have a little bit more of a decision rather than you get what you get. So that's my hot take.
Something I want to call out, which is always worth calling out, is just the reduction in revenue over $1 million that people listening, watching need to understand. This is something that you all are facing. We as a community will continue to face year over year, reductions in revenue right off the top, $1 million. So
and that's conservative right now. That number's not out yet. So as we get to the December meeting, we'll be able to have Pinkerton. For your Pinkerton brain, just in case, Pinkerton targeted, remember we targeted 8%. Every percent lower is about $200,000, $250,000, depends on the student, right, special ed. So just think every percentage. So if it goes down from 8 to 6 or 6 to 4, you're talking about each percentage point being about $200,000 range. And then the adequacy comes out, as you can see noted, before the next one, November 15th.
So they're required by law to give us the adequacy number by November 15th. And right now, the $1 million is because I moved the unreserved fund back to the original 1.5, and the first column where it's the approved 25-26 includes what we had for unreserved at the end of June 30th. However, I would imagine you're definitely going to see a reduction in adequacy, which was more than $1 million from last year to this year. So you're right, Jason, about that.
I'd like to reiterate what Derek said, a couple weeks ago. Level funding is not accurate. It's not even been level, right? So you get a pot of money here and then it gets taken away the next year. It's just a challenge we have in public education. I'm not talking feelings, I'm talking facts in regards to how we're provided. We received that one bump the 1 year based on it, and then you had to make up for it internally because they took that away. So we're continuing trying to figure out how to navigate those systems. In regards, the food service was another one. We received a lot of support and funding during that time, and then that got taken away. So now you're seeing revenue shortages. So I don't know where we go from here. I don't know that this is new for me. So anyone want to take the lead? Do we open up for discussion? Do you want to ask questions? Jane, do you have any more comments?
I do have a comment on the food service that you're mentioning. So just for clarification, when Mike talks about spend down for the food service, we did, like Mike said, during COVID, and we were doing feeding all students, we were getting reimbursed we were being reimbursed the federal reimbursement rate, not the rate that we charge. So every district had a surplus of funds, and you had to work on a spend down plan because you can only have an average of 3 months as a fund balance at any given time. Some of the things that we have as part of our spend down plan, the walk-in freezer, for example, here is going to be replaced. One of the things that spend down cannot go towards are unpaid meal balances for students. So I just didn't want, we're in this conversation about a spend down, and people say, well, spend down on our accounts and make it free for everybody. We can't use those surplus funds for student accounts. Just want to make sure everybody knows.
In my previous approach, what I would do is ask my budget committee and the board, where are we? Where are we on whether it's past practice of what you've done before, whether on what was proposed, whether is the increase needs to be in a certain spot. Really trying to target a number, because I'm the one that has to internally decide where are we going to reduce or remove either funding or encumbrances towards a specific thing. So
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. We typically, at this point, are slashing numbers from Pinkerton. But obviously, this year it's going to be a little different. And I think someone had mentioned the new developments in town. There's a pretty good sized one on Rockingham Road. There's 2 massive buildings that they're building with all full apartments. The townhouses, just judging by the cars there, look like they're all fully leased already. But those are probably going to come online next summer, and that's when people are going to be moving in. So that also, we usually have Jane usually does a very good job with enrollment for K-8, but I think that's even going to be very difficult next year to figure out. So sometimes what we proposed is, taking one of the teaching positions and creating a float position that we may never fill. So then that's some extra revenue if we never fill it. Or if we do have extra move-ins, we can float that teacher somewhere else. But again, and then there's been a lot of discussion whether or not these apartment buildings are going to bring in how many kids and what their ages would be. But I think we kind of got a little spooked here with this Pinkerton number, and we've been we were conservative many years ago and we got very aggressive because we kept coming under budget basically. So I think we're in the right spot. I think leveling it for now, but maybe by that December meeting, if you're seeing dropping numbers with your weekly numbers from Pinkerton, with the board used to always get those numbers too. And gosh, those things, it was like a roadmap from hell. It was up one week, down the next up. So it's hard to find a trend with those weekly numbers, but if there is something, then you can update us at that point, and hopefully by then we'll also know the actual Pinkerton number. I think the goal typically is to get below default, especially in the past couple of years, just because of the animosity towards school budgeting. But there's also been some challenges from the state, so I'm not super sold on getting under, because there's a lot of blame to go to the state at this point. So.
And two great points there, if you don't mind, sorry, is one is staffing. I've spoken to my board and board chair. I'm going to speak to the board at the next meeting, is I'm asking for a little grace period in regards to staffing. It's very hard to identify an audit as you're only 4 months into a system. We've had recommendations from our leadership in regards to reevaluating or repurposing staff. I like the way you use that. I don't feel comfortable saying I can reduce 4 staff and then in 6 months when I'm really into the job being like, I can't believe we did that. So I've been asking for a little bit of grace as I continue to identify either areas that are haven't been filled in a couple of years or may not be filled. We're also battling a challenging job market in regards to filling some of those roles through agencies, things like that. And then the second part I really liked, and I think we talked this afternoon in regards to that December update, really asking, because they did confirm, Tim confirmed that we'll get the Pinkerton rate the week of Thanksgiving, so he confirmed that. But the second thing is really getting a number before the 11th on where is our enrollment, rather, it's a good analogy, up and down the roadmap, because for the same email I got where 12 moved out, 4 moved in. So it was really a delta of 7. So if we can get a clearer number with that, it'll help articulate it. Now, if Pinkerton comes down, that 11% obviously drops. I think we're all into that together. But that also lowers the default. So it's an interesting swing. Again, Pinkerton is interesting as I'm navigating, because if I'm sitting here and I'm showing you that I've only, the increase is 7 and I can account for 95% of it on that slide, I'm telling you that we're only trying to increase the budget by 1%. But now the Pinkerton's a big swing for me, so. Michael, sorry.
I just wanted to clear up. So with the Pinkerton enrollment, just talking about pure enrollment numbers, we're down slightly over last year, right? Just in terms of the enrollment numbers, the issue comes in with how we cut last year, is that we cut more than what we're actually down.
Correct. The 40 number on this slide isn't student number, that's the reduction from the board at the time last year.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that there's not an increase in numbers of students at Pinkerton this year over last year. There's actually a decrease. The problem comes in that last year during the budget process, we cut more students than we actually ended up losing. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I guess my concern with the 10% increase is that on top of that, are we going to start paying for the bond for the repairs this year? Is that 44 cents? Is that this year that we start paying that?
That's in this slide. So
That's
included in the overall number, yes.
Okay, good. Well, then the other thing is that, the town's going to start paying for the, for their fire station. I think that's like another 30 cents per thousand. So those are just my concerns. Sure.
I think strategically too, if we're looking to put another warrant on for a trust or a revolving account or whatever it is we might do, we have to think of the overall palatability. So that would kind of be the situation where if we're going to choose to do that, then we probably going to need to get at least pretty darn close to default, if not under it, if we're going to have multiple warrants. If we're just going to go forward with what we have, we probably have a little leeway.
Yeah, and there's other ways to fund those warrants, right? So it can be raised and appropriated by the surplus at the end of the year. It can be the first $500,000 that go into it. So it could be zero taxpayers. It's really starting to create that account so that we don't end up in the same system we are 15 years from now, whatever it may be. But I hear you on that.
I definitely see agree with what you're saying. I also know that we hear a lot about the desire for the school district to pre-plan and have, more rainy day funds. So I think you're right. It's the way that you can sell it and, make it a positive, So I agree. Thanks.
I think if we can, get the capital improvement plan going this year and, fund it through, year-end funds, I think we want to get that established and show that we're not going to end up in a situation like we ended up last year, having to pass a $40 million, a $25 million bond that moving forward, we're going to be, investing in our buildings through this capital improvement plan.
Yeah, my goal over the next, let's say, overpromise? No. What's it? Overpromise, underdeliver? No, I don't want to do that. All right, so I want to do the opposite. Thank you. So my goal is, let's say 3-4 years from now, is when I get here, the only thing I'm showing you is one-off requests, right? Something that we didn't anticipate that may have all of a sudden be needed, or contractual and required increases, right? That's the goal, so that we don't, I feel like I'm playing catch up right now. I am. I feel like the supplies that were cut, we need. That's just the basic needs of operation in the building. Now, when we get into the fancy stuff, Clifton came in at 0%. I mean, that's outstanding. And he's still in a equipment replacement cycle. So in 3 or 4 years, when we come into these meetings, boring is going to be good, because it's going to be predictable. The taxpayer is going to know, and it's all going to be mapped out. And even if it's not in that cycle, you're going to know what's coming down in 2, 3, 4 years, so that it's not, I don't want to say competing with the town. Like, you never want to do that. You want to make sure that we are both articulating so that we're fair to the taxpayer that's living in Derry. And that's town and school. But the school always gets the black eye because we're the biggest number. That's just anywhere you go, by the way, no matter where you're at, that's the challenge that we have to face if the funding is going to continue to not be supported. We won the lawsuit, so when are we going to see that? I'm not sure when or if we will. We did receive a check, which I was going to tell the board on the next meeting, but we're getting our attorney fees reimbursed for about $29,000. So we're seeing that come back. There's some unanticipated revenue, but that's not going to move the needle of the increases, right? So those are the challenges that if the state, well, when, how about that? Because they lost. When we receive twice the amount of adequacy, you're only going to take this number of 23 and move it to, let's say, 46. That's still not everything that's going on in our budget. So becoming predictable, becoming sustainable, so that people can see what's going to happen, it's important. That's the goal. It's hard, but we have to work towards it. Can't happen in one fiscal year. And more importantly, the goal, I know now I'm talking, now you guys open me up. More importantly, the goal is, fiscal responsibility in municipality budgeting is $102 million, that your surplus should be anywhere between 2.5% to 4.5%. That's fiscally responsible. That's us trying to plan. Is it going to be a big winter or a bad winter? Are we going to have to plow an extra salt, or is the heat going to go up more? So all of those costs that are in your home finance, be a little bit more targeted. It's a little bit harder when you're operating this way.
I have a quick question about unforeseen expenses. I know that we have the DVS committee that's going to be deciding what to do with that building. If they decide, I know that one of the scenarios is possibly moving SAU over to DVS, but if there's things that need to be done to DVS, are we talking about not being able to do that until the 27 budget or the 27-28 budget? Do we need to factor in anything that needs to be done there? And if so, where would that come from?
Yes, that'll be a decision of the board. If the recommendation is that, there's several avenues. It could be surplus at the end of the year. It could be the use of retained funds, which is legally called contingency. The state of New Hampshire has made it a lot more easy for boards, to make decisions based like that in regards to, because the financial move to if that were to happen is really to reduce the building and the cost of the SAU off the books. So now instead of managing, 7, 8, 9, whatever, I'm losing track now, you're going to reduce the property. So it would not come, the goal for that, really the goal that I'm going to recommend to that board is not to make it any additional funds. It's to use the money and the resources we have available.
I have a quick question. Can you let me know what the decision was? I know that you level funded the school supplies, et cetera. What was the decision regarding the instruments that were requested?
Sure. So those are some of what I'm trying to evaluate in this first year. How do our books look in January, right? Can I do some purchases that meet the requirement in January? Or do we put it back in if Pinkerton numbers come down 4% to 4, 5, 6%? So it's the initial take back, because that's my job. I have to keep saying that. That's my job, so that when we're producing these large numbers, people understand what we're doing. But we want to make sure that, well, one of my other lines I've been saying, not to get on everyone's nerves, is it's been happening for years around here. Sorry. So we're going to continue to figure out how to navigate it until we get into that equipment cycle replacement, repair, recycle, replacement. There are a couple grants out there that we're looking into for music specifically. A lot of, I don't want to throw names out there, but there are a couple foundations out there that will do the equipment repair and replacement. And I know, anyone remember the specific instrument that we were looking for? Is it sousaphone? Does that sound right? I'm sure someone will text me. Yeah. So it's challenging as you're trying to navigate the reductions, but these ones seemed reasonable to me in regards to an approved teacher contract, a bond interest going in, all of these other things. So I'm trying to navigate that with Jane.
I just think that in terms of impact upon a child's life, if there's any way that we can make, that happen with the new instruments, I think that'd be really great. Thank you.
How does this work? I mean that. So recommendations of this committee, how is it flowed here? Someone help me. So I hear that, believe me, I would put them in tomorrow. That's what I would do. Does those recommendations help me understand this?
We need to collectively give you guys direction, right? So
Sure.
what you would need from us is to say, we're okay with proceeding with what you presented. We want to be at default. So it would be up to the members here to say this is.
But do the members get into the line items? Because I feel like that's my job as the
Yeah,
superintendent.
I think what's in front of us here right now is twofold, right? We have Pinkerton enrollment and what we want to do with that. And then we have the proposed budget relative to the default budget. So, your Pinkerton numbers, if we, decide to go with what you've proposed, or if we decide to get into that deeper, the default budget goes up and down with that. So if we were, right, if we add or remove Pinkerton students, that doesn't change your, proposed relative to default.
Yeah, and I'm asking because I wanted work for you guys.
Yeah, and then I think the second question is, where do we want to be relative to default? Are people comfortable with what is on the table right now? Do we want to look at a lower number than that? We're at 470 right now with what you've given us tonight. Do we want to tell these guys, well, can you get that to 300 or 200, or can you get under default? What is the palette of this group for that?
Yeah, and Jamie asked some great questions. She asked about the $750,000 that we're going to move towards the CIP. She also asked us to do some internal work in regards to the principals creating a priority list. So to Lori's point, like, why did we make recommendations to reduce? And then how do we prioritize when we have a shift in whether it's Pinkerton or whatever might be coming in, what do we add back first? So the principals are working on that. And then Mr. Tripp asked for a detailed list of trying to break down a building. I'm going to use Barca, I know, Grinnell, whatever. One of them was around $51,000. So what was that breakdown of basically what we were producing as a level fund budget versus the increase? The challenge is some of those supply items as we were trying to navigate were a little bit skewed from, now remember the way that we used to budget was a price per pupil. Okay, so as Mr. Brown kind of alluded to one time in the presentation, it would only cost you this versus that. That's not how I wrap my brain around funding. I fund like, if I'm gonna ask you for $500 in markers, I'm gonna purchase $500 in markers. I'm not trying to associate that cost per, it's like everyone's walking around with a dollar number on their head. We want to make purchases that are gonna support the students, right? But also have a projectable cost. Sorry, Mr. Tripp, I see you leaning in. Go ahead.
Say again, please.
Did you have a question? I thought you were leaning in for a question.
I have a question, but not right now.
Okay. So that's what we're trying to navigate. And listen, I have been I've been through a lot through the budgeting cycle in Hopkinton, and if they're watching, they would laugh with me. They were non-SB2, so we had to go to the school with the entire town in there and communicate and articulate and describe what we were asking for, right? It wasn't a ballot. So we were all in there and I had to know answers and articulate it. I've been challenged to cut $1.5 million from a $24 million budget. That's when it gets really, really crazy. But it's also put it forward to the voters, let the voters decide. So that's why I'm saying, how does this work? Is it an appetite? Is it a, like, if you tell me, Mike and Jane, you got to go back and come under $500,000 under default, then Jane and I have some work to do, right? That's the role of us. So I'm trying to help support you get to a comfortable, supportive measure, but also be able to stand behind it.
Just speaking about roles, I'm still really honestly confused about what the role of the Fiscal Advisory Committee is, because in the past, and you know, so maybe like 6 years ago or 4 years ago, you know, they would get together and hash out and you know, argue about things and come with some like real recommendations. And I feel like we're individuals here making contributions during this meeting. So I'm not clear about the role of our Fiscal Advisory Committee. And if you guys could just kind of let me know what your vision is for us.
Shed a little bit for you. So, not that our budget has never not been tight, but the past couple of years it's been a lot tighter. So there's a lot less things to argue about. There's a lot fewer ideas that can be brought because there's no sources of revenue. Bonding, going out for funding from outside sources are things that the administration would do, like the musical instruments, those types of things. Pinkerton was always the largest area where we could find cuts, and that it maybe hasn't dried up. That's a discussion I think we should have this evening just to see where we want to go, and that's probably the next discussion we should have just to get the ball rolling. But yeah, and, you know, we had. You know, the healthcare, we would have a massive increase in the projected cost of healthcare, but then we'd have to kind of negotiate among everyone and say, well, do we want to put that 26% increase in the budget, or do we want to come in somewhere, if we look at our trend line where we actually fall, do we want to go on that? So there were more things we could discuss. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of leeway this year in areas that we can actually make cuts in. But yeah, typically, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was multiple meetings. Every meeting was a very good debate, good topics brought up, a lot of good ideas brought up. And that's not that we can't do that, but there's just seems to me like there's fewer things to talk about.
When was the last time we really looked at class sizes? I know it's not ideal. I know, Mike, you asked for a grace period. What do we have for open or vacant classroom positions? It's not ideal, but I said this last year during the process, I think it's something we really need to look at a little more closely to say, you know, we as voters, we as taxpayers can say, you know, I want to have small classroom sizes so I have more dedicated learning from the teachers, but I also want to have lower taxes. I think we've got to explore all options, right, and understand what the impact could be, what a reduction could be if we were to increase classroom sizes. But I brought this up last year. I think, to Derek's point, to the point of pretty much everybody, there's not a lot we can look at without going line by line and cutting a box of pencils here or looking at reducing one whiteboard there. But it's something to explore, and obviously I don't know if you can give any information today, but maybe for the next meeting to say, if we were to increase and potentially cut an open position or whatever it may be, not necessarily cut it, I shouldn't use that word, but look at it, here's where we could maybe have some sort of reductions. But
Sure. So one thing is, I just want to reiterate, you have a line-by-line sheet. We gave that out last week. It is line by line. So where it's associated, which building it's associated with, what the cost is, what we purchased, what we didn't. So you have all of that information in more detail than you have in the past. Second part, Jason, love the question. I know you're leaning in here, so give me 1 second, is I'm going to ask the board, what's the class size policy, right? I've been asking it since I've been here. There are suggestions, there are not hard outs. So I lived this in Hopkinton when we started to talk about, we got to a point where it became reductions in class size, well, increase in class size, reduction in staff, and the board didn't have a policy in the books. So it became a really interesting discussion, if you want to put it, because, well, why are you taking from third grade when it should be? So having a policy that's going to drive that decision makes the community feel better, makes the staffing feel better, makes us feel better. So we can get that answer. I know Joe's going to talk about it specifically, but if we're going down that route, I would really emphasize that the board brings up class size policy at a board meeting for discussion.
got it. Thank you.
I mean, Jason, I can answer, I think embedded in your, you had a couple questions in there. One of them was how many classroom positions do we have open? I think you might have said that. So we don't have any classroom positions that are unfilled right now. Every single classroom teacher position is filled. We, as of today, November 4th, we have 11 teacher openings. They're all in special education. So 4 of them are special education teachers or case managers, sometimes they're known as. 6 of them are related service providers, which are, in this case, speech and language pathologists and school psychologists, which I know we've talked about. And 1 is an ESOL, which is English for speakers of other languages. I know, no acronyms. So that's our 11 positions. So we don't have any regular ed or classroom or math teachers or things like that. Those positions are filled. Now, we're a big district, so we have 318 teaching positions. So we always have, you know, need for long-term subs, maternity leaves, things, you know, all that kind of stuff that comes up that are scrambling for us. And at the start of the year, we were scrambling for a few of those classroom spots, but thankfully, there's no wood to knock on. Thankfully, we are full right now for those classroom spots. I don't know if that, you might have had another question.
He did. So class size on here.
Yep.
You can do some homework if you'd like. So these are the current classroom sizes. If you were, let's for fun, say there was going to be a reduction in that's not a good example. Yep, third grade at Barca. Those class sizes are 22, 21, 21, and 20. You take that 20 and divide it amongst 4, so you see an increase typically of about 3 or 4 per classroom. So that classroom would go from 22 to 25, 26, or the 21 would go to 23, 24. Now, when we talk about reduction in staff, if anyone's watching, specifically staff members, you never want to just cut, right? The goal is through attrition, retirements, things like that nature, replacement. So I love the question, and it's a real avenue to approach, and I think coming up with a game plan on how to approach it, some of the data's here. The challenging situation we're having, that I'm having with staffing is we're just in the second year of our new level set, right? So last year was the first year of the reorganization. everyone's really starting to get into a groove of where they were, how they were relocated. So that's why the evaluation of where would it come from is challenging for me. It's not to say that if you direct it, I can't do it. Those are just some of the worlds that I live in, that's all. Yeah.
What are the current numbers that we're going to be projecting for Pinkerton in October? Says they're 40 above. What does that number represent?
So we're projecting 1374 next year.
1374. Okay. And I have the page from last year that that basically showed us that traditionally October is the 1 month that it's the highest. So are you going to make your budgeting for Pinkerton in accordance with?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And Derek alluded to that. Like, that number is going to be different when we see you next in December. We're going to get an accurate increase from Pinkerton, and we're going to really target them for what our enrollment numbers are and what they could be. So you'll see adjustment in Pinkerton undeniably. Like, there's no question in that. As I continue to kind of make a joke about it, the thing is we don't know. We don't know until they tell us. No matter how many times we ask, we're working on it. So that's the challenge. Yeah.
I wanted to add on to Jason's thing about the classroom size. Personally, I would be very hesitant to expand classrooms, but looking at the projection of kids for some of the schools, the only one that would have wiggle room would be grade 4, because all of the classrooms are down. The top number is 25, and they're all down within 5-6 kids under what is recommended. And then the next year, and a couple of the grade 3s are much smaller, specifically in like Grinnell and South Range. So rolling over to the next year would actually not be such a huge gap, because there are fewer kids in fewer classrooms that could fit into then rolling into the 4th grade. Outside of that, like I said, large classrooms are much harder to maintain, especially when we're down aides and when we're down assistants. Trying to get through a regular day with the amount of kids that are in there is stressful. So obviously, one teacher and split amongst those kids, it's hard to get through a lesson plan. But if that's the only thing, if we had to look at it, I would say that grade 4 would be the only one really with the wiggle room for that.
Maybe we might want to look at how we compare to other districts. Sure. Just apples to apples. And obviously you could look at something similar size, or you could even do it relative, right, depending upon the size of the district. You just understand and take a sample of maybe some smaller districts, some that are close in size, and just say, hey, here's where we are versus where they are, and even state average. You could take a sample across the whole state and just understand what the baseline is.
It's really easily available for all of us. I've done that, and I just did a quick Google search, and I brought up a table. So I agree with you. I think it's a good idea.
I would say it's certainly worth investigating that, Jason, I think too, but I hear what you're saying, Jenna. For me, it would be difficult to reduce teaching positions if we're not going to look closely at administrator positions, particularly after retaining administrators following the restructuring. That was something that was left on the table at that time. So I would have a real hard time with that.
So I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not in favor of reducing class size. It's good where it is, or adding to class size. We have new curriculum. We're constantly talking about test scores and wanting children to improve. I won't even go there because I think kids do the best they can, but I don't think adding more children to classes is going to benefit anybody. And we should be doing what's right for kids, right? Right for the taxpayers, 100%. But it needs to start with the kids that we're here for, right? I had 3 phone calls last week from different parents, 1 dad, 2 moms. Do you know my child is in a class with 22 children? And I said, actually, I do know that. My children were in school with 37 children in their classroom. I love 22. I think if you walked into a classroom with 22 kids in it and saw the busyness of what's going on, the small groups that they work in, the amount of, without special ed teachers and assistants, and the amount of work that teachers are trying to do to make sure everybody's getting what they need, I don't think it's going to happen with more kids.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not saying that this is the solution. What I'm saying is it's worth digging a little bit deeper, because listen, I agree, right? No one wants 30 kids in a class, but I think as part of this committee, we need to understand, and same thing to your point, Jen, we've got to look at everything, right? So if we look at it and say the numbers just don't support, it's not worth it, right? The juice isn't worth the squeeze, sure. But let's look at it. And it's just the same with administration, right? Is there ways that we can look at things? And agreed, we're in year 2, but when we talk about the margin being so small, again, no one wants to sit here and say, well, we should cut this $2,000 software program. That doesn't move the needle in any direction, right? Or we need to reduce the amount of pencils that somebody's getting. That doesn't move the needle. If we're not going to have difficult conversations and really look at everything under a microscope, then the point of us all getting together every few weeks, every month, is not really there, right? Because we can say, yes, we're happy with this, give the voters the option, or no, get to default. And if it's that black and white, then we should be able to tell them, get to default, or we're okay to give the voters options. If we're not going to look at the big ticket items that potentially could move the needle. That's all I'm saying.
And the other thing about Pinkerton, and I've been here for a long time, there was always discussion about reducing our numbers, but there was always the concern of when we reduce it, what happens when we end up with more kids there than we reduced, or we have additional special ed needs so we've got to pull it from somewhere because we have to pay. And I've never liked, I'm just going to say this, and I don't mean this disrespectful to anybody else, but I don't like gambling against our kids. It's a scary position to be in, especially with our high schoolers, because when they increase, K-8 loses, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a terrible gamble. All around, it's a terrible gamble. And I don't have the answer, but it worries me a lot.
Yeah, class size is an interesting discussion. It becomes very personal, and I'm only speaking from living through it in Hopkinton. It brings out a lot of people when you start discussing specific class size. State of New Hampshire, well, the 306 has just changed.
That's what we want, Mike, is we want to bring out a lot of people and understand
sure.
The process, right? And what it takes to present a budget and to put a budget together. And to your point, Brenda, to educate students.
Yep.
Right? We need people to come out and understand what's happening.
And I say that in a... No, you didn't. You're helping me reframe my next sentence. So, the 306 has just changed, so they technically removed recommendations from the 306. Anyone know what the 306s are? 306s are the minimum standards for delivering education in New Hampshire. So there used to be crazy numbers like kindergarten, 25. 2 through 5, 30, which I don't think anyone has an appetite for, essentially, if I'm reading the room here. So it ends up really driving, and when I'm saying it's a board policy, like that's one of your main goals that we've talked about is setting policy. So that is a board level discussion to have, and then it gives guardrails. The policy that is on the books has some guardrails, but that frighteningly, we're almost breaking our own policy when it comes to third grade already at Barca. So if we have 3 move-ins, we're going to have to either waive the policy or add another teacher. So those are some of the things in regards to driving, I also want to be clear, you don't have to grant a grace period. I'm just echoing what the challenges of a new person with new eyes, new evaluations in the systems. I'm proud of where we are with staffing. To my understanding, it might be the most fully staffed we've been in years, and that has to do with how we've been recruiting. we've thrown a couple emails out to parents, and we have some people taking that leap into education that they've never been in. So we're really trying to fully staff the district so that you can see, back to your guys' points, we're trying to support the kids at every level. That's the goal.
I have a question. In our legislative committee meeting, maybe a year ago or so, representative from Pinkerton was there and said that the new history and special ed building was great because they were not going to have to have as many out-of-district placements as they were doing in the past. But why is there an increase of 12.25% in their budget, if I thought that their budget would be reduced because of that new building?
Yeah, so to refresh everyone, you have your baseline Pinkerton tuition, and then any other additional cost onto that, whether it's a service provider or a paraprofessional, it's an a la carte essentially. So in regards to what we have to provide our students, doesn't necessarily mean the students being outplaced, but they may need more PT, and then their rate is different than what ours is. Sorry, Jane, I was filling in the gap there a little bit.
No, you're good. Yeah, so I did a baseline of 8% across the board for all programs at Pinkerton, including all of their special education programs. And typically, those don't come in at the same as the general tuition, so we'll update those at the same time when we get the new rates. But while they are keeping some programs in-house, which they are, some of our programs that we highlighted in the first presentation that we handed out, for example, their NECC program, which is their program for their students with autism, we have an additional 5 students that will be attending there, and it's great that they're keeping them in-house, just like we keep them in-house, but there's a cost to that, so it is a little bit more expensive. We have additional students in our PASSES program for our students with emotional disturbance. So all of the areas, our Director of Student Services, Laura Powers, again, looked at every student that we have enrolled there. Each student who we anticipate from our 8th grade moving up, particularly our students with who have autism, who may need to go to those programs, or our students with other specialized needs. So we are looking at all of those, and she did adjust her numbers based on actual students.
So I have a question based on, I'm looking at the sheet, the proposed budget sheet with the breakdown, and you said a lot of it is non-negotiable. So what is it that we actually are able to work with? Because if we look at this and see that it increases over $7.7 million, but you've already said the first 3 or 4 lines in the 100s is non-negotiable or whichever it is, then even asking us to get down to default is not going to be possible if it's non-negotiable. So what is it that we can actually work with and whittle down or try to find the coupons to cut here to make it so that we can make any kind of dent in this 7.7 that's over?
I don't know where I don't know where my slide went, but the key areas are going to be salaries, benefits, and Pinkerton. Those are the needle movers at this moment, right? So those are the costs associated with when you talk about the next level of trimming or the debates or the discussions, we can get into the supplies, right? So let's take the supplies as an example. If we're going to take the supplies, I asked for 24-25, and we're going to move it to the 25 number, we're going to reduce it by $30,000. So it's the discussions to be had are, how do we appropriately budget it for Pinkerton, right? What that number is, because it's still not settled in on what it is accurately. And then is there a articulated response in the salaries and benefits? So let's say, as we're working through this together as a new process from what we used to do, all right? Let's say you say, Mike, we need to get down to, just for fun, you need to get down $472,485. So I would work with Jane on looking at, I don't know if I can legally say it yet. I don't know the rules in this district. Retirees that have put in, okay? Let's use last year as an example. There were 17 retirees. This year we have nowhere near that number. So let's just for fun say 7. I would have to work with Jane on, we know 7 have put in, right? So that means if they're at a master's, they have a master's degree and they've been teaching for 15 years and their salary is at, I'm trying to use even numbers, their salary is at $80,000. So in that budget, we would have to make a plan, the 3 of us, on how we fill that position, and we needed to reduce that position by 30% salary and then our target approach on how we're going to hire. So of those 7 retirees, we need to reduce that hiring number, that delta. We need to hire someone that's newer to the profession, right, hasn't been around as long, maybe a brand new educator. So we need to reduce our salary line on anticipated coming in by that, I'm just doing rough numbers, let's say that's $225,000, right? So we have hired at a lower rate. So there's 225 that we could reduce the 472 by 225. The interesting part though is sometimes when retirees retire, they're only a 2-person plan because their family's often gone. Then when you're retiring newer or younger, it might be a family plan. So now you're losing that. So those are the salary and benefit hiring procedures or practices we need to do. Jenna, to your specific point, it's really salary benefits Pinkerton. And then we have some stuff that I left into the new teacher program that launched by Dr. Crawford, right? So we have some associated costs there that we could, when I use the word cut, $50,000. So now instead of paying people to be mentors and paying people to be part of the program to try and recruit and retain, you're now going to trim. So it's a crazy mechanism we have in our profession of, I'm getting all my analogies wrong tonight, but steal from Peter to pay Paul, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. Like we are, and I think Derek did a great job, we're at a crux here in our world of, there's not a whole lot here anymore for debate and discussion. Salary, benefits, administrators, teachers, those are the heavy discussions and heavy lifts.
Well, and I think the hard thing too is that, I'm sorry, were you about to? I think the whole thing too is what we were discussing earlier in finance about how certain positions that we have to pay for out of contract service because we're not advertising, or not to say we're out advertising, we're trying to get those positions filled and there aren't enough people out there or the salary isn't enough. So we're talking about trying to make that more appealing to drive them in so that we don't have to pay for out-of-contract services, but we're saying that maybe we can try to offer less to somebody else coming in to do something else. And to go to what, to kind of piggyback off Brenda was saying, is that this is all at the cost of the kids. So we're trying to make sure that we're hiring people that are good for the job, good for the position, that want to stay in Derry, but we're also trying to not be $7.7 million over budget. I don't see how or where on earth this is going to come from.
Do we have any wiggle room in transportation, bus routes, distance that students can be bused? I mean, there's got to be some efficiencies in transportation.
So roughly I don't know the contract, roughly each bus is about $125,000, probably around $125,000. So there could definitely be some analysis of where kids get dropped. Also, interestingly, we're technically K-8, right? But we bus our high schoolers too. So there are avenues there for, let's say, a reduction of a bus or two. That's definitely an approach. And I want to reiterate, we're not over budget. We're at a projected cost. And again, I'm not asking for anything, we're not asking for anything that's not already been voted on or approved or required. So those are the interesting pieces.
Can I make an ask with regards to, you bring up a good point, Pinkerton busing?
Yeah.
It may be worth understanding out of all of our students, how many take the bus and how many do not take the bus, get rides, drive, walk, et cetera, and how many buses we have in place.
Sure. I think that analogy has been done recently, so I think it could be pretty easy pull.
Thank you.
No, not analogy, analysis.
I got you.
There are other districts that charge high schoolers to ride the bus, so there's that option. But I think everyone, if anyone has ideas that they want for the team to come up with numbers, we should try to get those out now. Just we have two big numbers we don't know, which is the adequacy number and PA's actual cost. We're not going to know those until December. So I think if we can provide them with some work for them to go back, and then once we get all the information in December, we can start to wield it on. I mean, PA may come in less than we think they will, probably not. Sure. But it may solve all of our problems.
Very often, they look at this.
Yeah, I mean, I hit on this at the top of the meeting. There isn't a lot of the budget that we can do much about. 80% right off the top is salary, benefits, and Pinkerton tuition. So, you can look at that, you can look at positions, but I think, Joe said, a lot of the positions that we have unfilled are specialized positions. They're, speech paths, they're school psychologists, they're ESOL, and those are services that we have to provide. And if we don't have someone on staff, then they have to be outsourced, and that costs more than having someone in-house. So the money that we're budgeting toward those positions ends up paying for the outsourcing of those services.
The only thing that's not contracted.
So, even though those positions are vacant, that money is being spent on those services in other ways.
Okay, last thing I'm going to say, then I'm going to shut up. I promise. We're over default by 450.
472.
So obviously, any cuts we make, we're jeopardizing the adequate education of our children in this district. But I think we need to plan to make that cut. So start thinking in your minds of areas where we can cut it, because if it goes to the ballot and we don't get the budget passed, it goes to default. So at that point, it's very hard to make decisions on the fly. It's better to plan on that at this point. And then if we get here in December and we've made some headroom on Pinkerton enrollment we can cut, or if their number comes in less than we expect, then we can not worry about that. But we should be doing the planning now so that we give the voters the opportunity to give us success.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that in previous years. We were over default 2 years ago, and there was a conversation of what makes that up. What would be the first things out if that budget failed, and we got a default budget, because if like you said, if you're going to get people to vote for whatever it is, $472,000 over default, what is it that they're losing if that budget fails?
Go ahead, Mr. Tripp, before I go.
Probably a silly question, but I noticed in the, what do you call this?
The summary sheet.
Summary issue, sorry.
The gospel.
I thought it was but on debt service, there's a dash in the over/under budget column. So I assume that debt service is not included in the default budget?
What that means is that you're contractually obligated to that bond, so the default would be the same as the proposed.
For that item?
Yes, for
Okay.
that item, yes.
So,
That's Honeywell and the new bond.
all right, so since we have something else that's contractually obligated, I believe we passed the teacher's contract last year. Is that included in the default budget?
Yes, the salary increases are included in the default.
The contractual part, yes.
All right.
Yeah, the increases in, the approved by the voters, labor agreements, that's all included in the default budget. Transportation increases, that's a contract, that's in the default budget. If we, like,
So things that are already approved are in the default budget, but we can't touch.
Right.
yeah, well, you can touch them, but it's not going to change, your default budget is going to change with those things. Like if you were to find a way to reduce a bus, that's contractual, but that would bring the number down.
It's the same math. That one's the same math. You'll notice up top under the delta for general and special education in regards to non-union employees, you'll see that there's a negative in it because those salaries are not included because they're not contractually obligated.
So another question. So at this point, we've already figured out what the default budget is, right?
Well, it is still an estimate because Pinkerton number will adjust the default.
All right, so we have an estimate for what the default budget is. And that would be itemized, so we could see what numbers are in the default budget before we get a total?
Do you mean what items are in the default budget?
Yeah, and their amounts.
Yes, you'll get it will look the same, similar to this, but I will give you a list of what things are part of a default and what things would not be included in a default. And also, there's a default form that I have to fill out for the state that has to be published as well with the default number, and that's also included in your annual report each year. So we have to separate that out.
But if we're looking to see, what the default consists of, it'd be handy to be able to.
The default is last year's operating.
Yeah.
It's just carried straight over.
Okay, so we could get a copy of that?
Well, the default budget is not itemized. And, this is a thing that I think confused a lot of people when we did get the default budget is, Gordon saying that the default budget is just a number. It's not dictating how that number is broken out.
I can work with you on that because the way we've been programmed in our profession is it's last year's operating budget plus or minus contractual obligations, and that's what's posted and put in the annual. So I mean, if we're operating in a default budget, if we spent $23 million in Pinkerton last year, it's the increase of the tuition plus the $23 million. So I think that's the challenge I'm looking for. Because again, you have the itemized list of the spending. But I can work with you on that.
That's okay.
Yeah. I want to make sure you have what you need.
I just want to circle back to what Derek said about any ideas or thoughts or direction, because we're kind of at like a little bit of a stalemate here. I think we've either got to provide direction or provide homework for them or give them something to bring back to us for the next meeting so we can start to.
This is what's unique for me, and that's why I'm sincerely asking how this goes.
So I think in the past, one of the things that kind of that unraveled a little bit last year, because I was on fiscal for a very short window before I got put on the board, but there didn't seem to be even the structure for fiscal as to if they did their own thing, because I think everybody kind of did something and then got answers, and then there was supposed to be somebody who spoke for the board or the fiscal advisory committee, which was the gentleman who's not here anymore. I don't know his name.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago.
I thought last year.
No, it was last year.
Yeah, last year. Christopher, thank you.
Yeah, he was the veteran member.
The veteran member, so he was kind of like he was just voluntold that he was going to be the speaker of the group. So I think that fiscal in itself needs to decide outside of the school board how it wants to be a fiscal advisory committee, whether or not they break off into smaller groups and like this many people tackle this many people tackle that, and then they report to each other, and then they nominate somebody or somebody volunteers themselves to be the one who makes the recommendation, because that's where it started to unravel, because nobody knew what their job had to be. So
Well, that was my question, and then
Yeah.
I was told that there wasn't a lot of wiggle room by Derek, and so I'm sort of like then I guess we don't meet and have suggestions and give recommendations.
The Fiscal Advisory Committee is just that, it's an advisory committee. So advisory committees do fall under 91A, so you guys can't just meet on your own.
We were told last time that we don't because we're not elected and we could meet.
We said that we would look into it.
Okay, so we can't meet now by ourselves. But before we could, right? Before?
But my question, so is it kind of like the thing where there's a quorum? Can they make groups of like 3 people?
I mean, I'm not making the rules into how you guys talk to yourselves outside of the meetings. You know, if you guys, do you want to, chat on the phone,
That's what I mean, they need some structure.
Something that I'm dictating here.
That is the purpose of this meeting.
Yeah.
Right here, is to have this dialogue collectively for people to look at the information and say, oh, this to me doesn't make sense. Let me reach out to the administration, or let me bring a question to the meeting and say, I need more information here. But ultimately, we make a decision collectively here. We've got to tell them default, or we're okay with where it is presented now. We had the same thing last year, and I think what we ended up doing is going around the horn for folks to just say, I'm good with default, or I want it to, or I'm good with where it is, or I want it to be at default. But they need direction, because right now, they're kind of like just treading water to say, give us direction and we'll go that way.
But they're also just getting the information. So unless, as we're hashing it, there's a lot of people that haven't even spoken up yet. So they haven't even got a chance to digest this. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we have between now and the next meeting, which is December something, 11th, that they can either do some homework on their own and then come back. Because to make a recommendation now, then what happens?
It's as simple as, I would challenge everybody to say, am I okay with the budget that they've presented thus far today? Or do I feel more comfortable to go towards default or get to default?
I guess my point is that we're the Fiscal Advisory Committee. We're not fiscal advisors. So my understanding of a committee is that the committee gets together and offers recommendations as a whole, not as individuals. But I think that that's not the idea of what our role should be of the board. I just want to be clear on what we're supposed to be doing.
The Fiscal Advisory Committee, is appointed, is appointed by the board, and the point of it is to give advice to the board, who holds the ultimate authority to decide how the budget is made up. So, it's ultimately the board that is going to approve the budget that goes forward in January. The point of these meetings is to get advice from you guys when we ask questions like, what are you, to bring you in as voices from the community to say, how do you feel about putting forward a budget that's over default by $400,000 or $200,000? And then we can give that direction to the administration. This group is recommending that we think the best course forward is a budget that is $200,000 over default. And then they can go back and put that together, and at the next meeting, they would bring us a new version of this budget that's $200,000 under default. They would tell us what they took out, and then, we would decide if we would want to move forward with that.
My point is that we are not responding as a group, because I know for sure that Tom and I have similar ideas, but we also have very different. So I feel like, I guess, I'm not going to argue. Obviously, you're the board, and I respect that. I'm very glad that I'm here. I just think that it's just a little unclear to me what we're supposed to be doing. But I think I understand better now, so thank you.
So I think to Michael's point that maybe it was Jason that said it, like, we need to just, maybe at this point, because we only have the December and then we run right into the budget, the deliberative session in January. So we only have one more meeting for the administration to come back with new numbers. So if we, for sake of, because it's 8:15 now, to go around, now that both, like, we had the presentation from the teachers or the principal's last meeting, and now this one with this breakdown, that we go through around to each one of the fiscal advisory members and get your direct feedback of where you think we are and what information more that you would need or where you think the direction that we would go. Because there's, a few that we've heard from and some that we haven't. So at this point, it's our roundtable discussion of where.
Yeah, to go back to my earlier point, there are two things that we really need to give these guys coming out of this meeting. And one is the Pinkerton enrollment that they've given us. Are we comfortable with that? Do we want to look more into that? And then the default number, are we comfortable with the number that they've given us tonight? Do we want to see that lower? Do we want to see it at, 200,000 over, 100,000 over, or closer to default itself? And those are really the two things that we need to give these guys tonight so that they can come back in December with a budget that we can hopefully say, this is ready for prime time.
The reason
I don't think we have to put everyone on the spot either, so some people may not be as comfortable bringing up ideas, but emailing them, Jane would always create kind of a running list of questions that would be available at the next meeting. It would go up onto the shared file or whatever. So if you're needing to digest more and you don't have anything particularly to add tonight, then over the next week or two, send in information to them, providing them enough time for the December 11th meeting to work on that for you. But that was always worked in the past. People would always send in. Bruce was great about just sending in massive amounts of questions to Jane, and we'd all read through his questions like, it's a really good question. I didn't think of that. So that's another option too. If you don't have anything specific tonight, then email them and they can work on that for you.
Yeah, and just a couple things here after this is, one, we can add more meetings. It's up to you guys. It's not set in stone. I targeted 2 to 3 because previously there was 4 to 5. In reviewing some of those, not sure that there needed to be 4 to 5, so that's where we started at this year. The second part is, in regards to clarification of the role of the fiscal advisory, I find it challenging myself because let's say you make a recommendation for fun to say input the instruments back into the budget. It's a recommendation from an advisory committee that's really going to go to the board, but ultimately I need to make the decision on whether that number is more valuable or not in regards to that. So I think that's what I've been trying to feed out in regards to solutions, is I still need to put forward a budget in regards to how we can support all of the needs of our students. So I'm trying to navigate that as well. And I agree with Derek, like if you don't feel comfortable as this goes on, that's fine. Or if you haven't looked at the line item over the last 2 weeks that we gave to you a couple weeks ago, that's fine. I'm trying to be in line with the timeline of the board in regards to warrant articles, proposals, the DVA, all the things that are going on. That's my job. I'm the traffic manager, right? So green, red, yellow, red, all of that fun stuff. So if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. I'm trying to teach new habits, and I've been saying it at all the board meetings, right? We've reprogrammed how we do board meetings. We're trying to realign what we do. In all my districts, the target of the budget committee would be a number, right? And whether it's default, whether it's above, whether it's below, it's always been a number, not the stuff. That's my hard work that I have to determine on where we reduce, or what I need to say is, let's use the 3 psychologists as an example. Let's reduce a psych position for $150,000. That's great, but we're in a district in which we have to provide those services, so I'm going to have to make those costs up. So where am I going to take that money from to make those? It's a cut, it's a reduction, but I'm still going to have to do that. So I just want to be clear as we're navigating this. I'm trying to work with you guys on where we fit as a role and where the recommendations move forward. I'm going to continue to reiterate we're already taking our running notes on where we can articulate deductions if that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I clearly think the decision for presenting the budget was obviously with administration, and school board obviously is going to approve that. But I think, the way I look at my role here is I'm just here to look at what you present and make any recommendations that I see, and we go from there. But I think I know one of the things that I'm concerned about is the 10% increase. I think that's going to be a hard one for the voters to accept, and I don't know where we go from there, but I mean, that would be one of my recommendations, that we drop that 10% down to, I mean, I'm not going to give a figure, but I just think that's too high.
So looking at the Bible, is that what we call it?
Sure.
All right. If we were to remove $500,000 from the proposed maintenance budget, would that put us below the default budget?
So that's one avenue that always is easily an area to reduce, and then I'm gonna sit here as the superintendent and bang the drum of, that's always the easy answer, and then we end up in spots where we end up here.
Well, I was just asking whether, what the effect would be. I wasn't saying should actually do that.
No, I know, but it's my job to advocate for why we shouldn't. And that's not a line item. That would be my first approach for the reduction of the bottom line.
But would it?
Yes.
Put us below the default?
Sure.
Okay.
We could trim 500,000.
So we can look at all these line items that have an entry in the default column and propose reductions if the goal is to get below the default.
I think it's maybe just simpler to ask them to present us with a default budget at the next meeting. They can find the areas to make those arrangements made. It could be the Pinkerton number coming in lower. It could be lower enrollment that they're seeing at Pinkerton, so there may be no cuts, or they might find some other areas they can cut. They're gonna know more about the budget areas that can be cut than we would if we just to pick out like, oh, take 100 out of why is this admin up 100,000? Get rid of that one, my suggestion is present a default option next time. And I think once we have more clear picture of Pinkerton, we can look at that Pinkerton enrollment number. I don't think I have enough information tonight to haggle over cutting 5 or 10 students right now.
Yeah, I think, what Mike is trying to get at is, he is trying to kind of reset the way that we think about these things and the way that things have been done in the past. Because we have in the past sat here and spent 20 minutes arguing about a $40,000 line item. And, the way that Mike wants to approach this is that, we can tell him an overall number. Do we want to get to default? Do we want to be at $200,000 over default? Are we comfortable with where we are? And if we tell him that we want to be at 200,000 over, or we want to be at default, him and his team will go back and decide what comes out to get to that number that we've given them.
Yeah. Well, I would agree that the process of cutting the Pinkerton estimate is risky because, we found out tonight that we're $700,000 under our estimate, so we had to come up with $700,000 someplace to pay Pinkerton because it wasn't in the budget.
Yeah, and when you cut the Pinkerton numbers too, again, that's included in the default. So that would help, to Tom's point, if you were trying to get that, overall percentage increase down, but it's not going to move your default, the difference.
Can I just read policy BDAF? Fiscal Advisory Committee. I just want to read it so that we're all understanding this. The board may appoint a Fiscal Advisory Committee to counsel it as one means of discerning the needs and desires of the school district and its residents. The ultimate authority to make the decision will continue to reside in the powers and duties of the board as imposed by the state law and regulations. So as I'm reading this on what our role is here, it's to advise in the desires and needs of the district. So that is some of the recommendations, whether it may be in regards to some of that stuff. So I'm just trying to target our approach here for however we want to wrap this up, whether we want to send us on some homework missions or whether we want us to put some stakes in the ground in regards to targets. If we want to add more meetings, we're more than happy to have more meetings. This is our job on our side of the fence, but I'm going to go back. I'm looking for some advice because when we go into receiving the adequacy and getting the real Pinkerton numbers, we want to make sure when we come on the 11th that you are provided more of a concrete number. I guess that's the word I'll use.
I'm a little nervous that we're going to get to the 11th of December. We have 1 week past that is the holiday break, and we won't, if we can't come up with something before December 11th or by December 11th, we're going to have a problem. So I don't know if we should add another meeting before December 11th.
So what's weird is we won't have the number for Pinkerton in this is me wrapping my brain around my new system. Won't have the number until Thanksgiving. Then we come back, we have a school board meeting on the 2nd, which should be really driven around budget and so there, I guess we could squeeze one in between. What are the objectives of this role for? Does this group say yay or nay on the recommendation and then the board moves forward with it? Help me navigate that a little bit.
That is generally how it's been done.
Collectively, we need to say we want the budget at default, or we are good with the budget that you've presented thus far, or we think you should be at 200,000. But we've all got to kind of speak up and say what we believe and what we feel.
Yeah, and of course, the budget isn't final until the board approves
That's right.
the warrant down the line in January. But generally speaking, I don't think that, there have probably been very few occasions where what has gone to the warrant hasn't been what's come out of this room.
Mm-hmm.
With the information that we have today, right here and now, are you comfortable, or are we comfortable with the budget that they've given us, or do we want it somewhere else?
I will put in, I think, looking at the number, that we're going to possibly have a hard time because of the taxes that are going to get hit with the bond coming in, and then the fire station, that going over what we've had is not a smart idea. But to give us some wiggle room, if we can cut that overage by half, if we get bumped down to default, if they vote for default, we will be in a better position to take that hit. I don't want to go right to default. I want to be able to give that option and that choice to voters. But I think being just about $500,000 over is going to be a hard pill to swallow with the hit that we're going to take with, like I said, with the other two things that are adding into our taxes. So I would personally like to see it in like half over.
Yeah, I mean, there's basically three options here. What we've been presented, default, or somewhere in between. Right? And I mean, personally, I've never liked the idea of putting forward an under default budget because you're not giving the voters a choice. You're giving them, a default budget that's less than what you're proposing. Then, what kind of choice is that? So if we put forward something, I think, I'm in agreement that we put forward something somewhere in the middle there. We say, can we get that number down to 200,000? And that, gives voters a choice. Either we end up with a default budget, or, we can make the case for, why we're putting forward a budget that's over 200,000.
I'll say I agree with Jenna. I would like to see that number to over 200.
So we can kind of go around the room here and, what's everybody's opinion basically of those three options? Are we comfortable with what we've been given? Do we want them to look at cutting that down somewhat to, $200,000, a number that we put out here? Or do we want them to bring back something at default? So, let's go around the room.
There is a fourth option. It could be under default. Just want to be clear, yeah. So.
Yeah, well, at or under default.
Okay, that's better.
Around default. So, yeah, let's go around the room. What do you think, Richard?
What do I think? Well, if you're at or under default, then you've effectively removed the voters' position of being able to defeat the proposed budget. So if the goal is to...
Put on your microphone.
Oops, sorry.
Sorry.
It was on.
Closer. So people can hear you.
Well, I don't think they want to hear me. But, so, like I said, if the goal is to remove the voters' option of approving the budget, then put it below the default budget.
So, Richard, your vote is to get to the 200,000 number?
The 200,000 number is
Over default.
Say again, please?
So, we're basically looking at three options here. Get down to around default. To cut, the number that's been put out there is to, get to something that's $200,000 over default, or go with what we've been given tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I would say under default.
The $200,000, is that what you're saying?
No, just under default, not 200,000 above default, but under default. I thought there was three options: over default, over default by some unknown amount, over default by 200,000, or under default.
well, what we've been given tonight by Mike is, what is it? It's around 400,000 over, right?
Yes,
Yes,
I
so there's
understand
that choice, and then to have them cut down to a number that's still over default, around 200,000 is the number that's
Yep.
been put out, or to cut down to a number that is around the default number.
No, I want to be under default.
You want to be, close or under default?
Yes.
All right, gotcha.
I agree with Richard.
I'm actually okay with being 400,000 over default, just leaving it as is.
I'd like to see it about 2 or 250 over default.
How much over?
200 or
Okay.
2 to 250 over default, 1,000.
I think if we were to get it under default, it won't be by much anyway. So there's no harm in shooting for a higher number, knowing that if that fails, we'll just end up with the default we have already. So I agree that we should go a little bit above default with what Jenna said. And I'm sorry, my question was before about the capital improvement plan. Did that 750,000, I don't know if I got an answer to that. Mike?
Yeah, it was removed, and we're moving that over to the CIP plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That would be put on a separate warrant.
it's on a separate warrant article, but we're not going to put it at 750. But the initial
Not.
750 that we presented was removed from the bottom line, yes.
But did that include like a capital improvement, like savings account sort of thing?
That's going to be onto its own warrant article.
Okay,
yes.
sorry.
That's
All
all
right.
right.
Thank you.
So you're with Jenna and the 200.
I'm good with the way the budget is written, but I do want to understand more about any efficiencies that may be available in transportation and have a better understanding as to increasing classroom sizes, what impact that may have.
I would agree with Jason. I'm good with, the number that you put forward. I think that you put a lot of thought into this and, the costs that are going into this. And, I'm comfortable with putting forward this number. And again, it gives the voters a choice. If, we're putting forward what we think is a responsible budget, and if, the voters don't agree, then we get the default.
I would agree about the budget that was presented this evening, 472 over. Echoing what Jason said about efficiencies in transportation, we can sure put classroom sizes on the table as well, but again, I'd like to reiterate that administration should be looked at closely as well.
So, not to be too long-winded about this, but I have no problems with as it is presented, but I think one of the biggest factors in this is all gonna be if the district assessment comes in too high, it doesn't matter what we do in this room, we're gonna go to default, because that's the historic voter trend in this town, I feel like. I think it's 15 years, something like that. There's only been now 2 years that it didn't pass as default. So that's going to be a big factor, I think, in the decision. But I think the adequate education, how that comes back, is going to make a big difference in that idea. So, but I do agree that no choice is not really the way to go either. So, like my uncle told me over and over my entire life, my uncle said, you can't get it if you don't ask for it. So it's a good way to think about it. So that's my thought. So
are you comfortable with the number that they put forward tonight, or do you want them to look at reducing it?
At now, but it's going to depend on adequate, because I know that's all going to change.
So, at the very least, would you say that you would?
This year, so I don't know.
At the very least, would you say that you'd like them to look into maybe taking it down to 200?
Yeah, 200 or something, if, depends on how it all shakes out, I guess.
Yeah, I'm good with the 200 number and looking at efficiencies. Jane, is 100,000 increase still about 2 cents on the tax rate? So the 12 million or 11 million, we're looking at over $2 increase.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap that up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Like I said, I like that 200,000 over because I feel it strikes a good balance between cutting something, well, not that cut's the right word, but bringing it down a little bit while also giving the voters an option. So I support the 200 over.
During the discussion last year about the bond, the board was very astute, and they said that they tried to get it under 25 million because that's a psychological turning point. There's a reason why stores pricing's at 1999 as opposed to 2001. So kind of echoing what Tom said, Tom wanted to reduce the 12.4% increase, and I'd like to see that percentage point under 10. And so I guess I'm going to go for somewhere in the default plus 200,000 range just to get it. It would be more palatable to the taxpayers to get it under that psychological threshold. Tom?
Yeah, I think the 10% is probably too high. I don't think the taxpayers are going to go for it. I think the $250,000 over default is, I think that's reasonable.
I'm going to go with the 250 over default as well.
I also don't like the 10%. I don't think we'll get it. But I also don't know what I want to recommend, because I don't have all the information that I need to make that decision. So I'll just say that I think 10% is too high, and I'm going to leave that with you, and hopefully you can come back with something better.
I'm good with default, but I also think that the transportation really needs to be looked at, because I do know that they're doing the electric buses, and I'm pretty sure that First Student did that, and I want to look at the finances for the transportation, because I think that could change. So that's where I stand with it.
So, a couple things. When you're referencing points of reference in regards to tax rate, and Derek brought up, it's different in each town. So we're saying here it's 2 cents every 100,000, about 2 cents every 100,000. That has to do with the evaluation of your town, and when's Derry up for a reval? Anyone know by chance? We do it every year. It's normally a 5-year cycle. Anybody? 2029 is the next one. Okay.
5 years, we had one last year.
Okay, so we went through that, so that's part of the adjustment in regards to that.
It's not actually a set. I think they have to do it every couple of years, but there's also a percentage that it has to stay within the percentage of market value. So it could actually happen every year depending on how much the market moves. So it's not really a set time frame.
All right, the second part, and this is great. And so looking for a little bit more guidance, because we're talking about the percentage of increase, right? So 10%. I did my own calculator math, so don't hang me on this. So if I were to pull up the slide again, salaries and benefits aside, right now, $8.86 million of the 11 is non-negotiable. So I did not create that increase. We didn't increase. That was voted on and approved, whether it was through the bond, whether it through a teacher's contract, whether it was through a busing contract, whether it's, so 8.86. So of the difference or the delta, around $2.5 million, in order to make up that difference of 8% that is, again, non-negotiable, that's going to be a reduction in staff and benefits. That's specifically. Busing inefficiency is great, but that's only $150,000 a bus, maybe $300,000. It's going to come down to staffing, and that's a discussion whether the board has to have it, whether the community has to have it. In regards to if we're going to have different warrant articles that are voted on and supported, it's tough when it then becomes a battle against what the normal budget is, right? And I'm not here to pick fights, but this fire station has been brought up 3 times. We did not move a fire station forward, right? So this competition factor between the town and the school is never healthy, number one, but number two, we have to continue to put forward what we need for our students, right? So as I'm getting to know the community and developing these new standards I just want to say some things on the record so that people have an understanding when we come back and whether we make recommendations or whether adequacy plays in our favor and then we put things back in. I want you to know how I'm working to develop something that I believe, as I mentioned earlier, that the voters should be able to choose on, right? If they, as Mr. Tripp referenced, if they want to defeat the budget and we operate in default, then that means we either didn't articulate the reasons behind we needed that 200,000, 400,000, whatever it is. That's on me. That's on my team. Or if we are close enough, then we're showing the responsibility of projected budgets. Excuse me. Man, I'll get there in a second. Hang on. Predictable budgets. Thank you. That's the goal. So I appreciate the feedback. If we want to have more meetings, I'm fine with it. If you want to have a one-on-one meeting, please call me. I've met with 3 people last week in regards to the budget. The challenge, though, is that the quote-unquote 10% increase, 90% of it is not our fault. It's a great support of the voters in what they voted to approve in regards to the bond, the contract, and the other things in there. And then the one last thing I want to finish on, I'm really hoping that we have a clearer picture with Pinkerton so that we can, let's say Pinkerton comes down 1%. That means we're coming down 1%, so 10 becomes 9. So some of, not really clearly strictly tied to that, but that will help. So questions, comments?
When you have that 10.9% increase on here, you're calculating that off of just the budget from last year, too. You're not counting the first year of the teacher's contract, the first year of the bond. Am I right about that? So I think we should probably look at that percentage increase, including the first year of those warrant articles that were approved separately. You know, when we're talking about percentage increases.
So I know everybody was talking about the fire department, but we've been paying for that now for 3 years already. This bond for the school is going to hit the taxpayers on the December bill. So that's another thing to think about.
Is it possible if we don't meet again, that when the estimates for the adequacy funding and when the Pinkerton numbers get released, that an email can go out to everybody with that updated information so that we know in between the meetings, so that we come prepared to the December 9th meeting with those numbers?
Yeah, I think when that new information is received, you guys can send that out.
Yeah, anything live that I have from here on out, I'll send it out to the group as a whole to digest so that we don't have to wait to digest it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Once this committee makes a recommendation, I'm just trying to, they make the recommendation to the board, does the board then discuss that recommendation? Or is it just, this is what was recommended?
Generally, we've gone with the recommendation of the entire group as a whole. And I mean, I will say, you know, keeping track of when we went around, it was overwhelmingly for, having you guys go back and, come up with something in the range of $200,000 to $250,000 over default.
There was only one time that I can remember in the past 6 or 8 years where the board was opposite of the fiscal advisory, and that's because at the hearing, some pretty good testimony was given and the board changed their mind. The fiscal advisory did write that in their comment, but they usually write for the annual review. But typically, we go around the room to hopefully on that December meeting and say, yes, we support this. And we look for everyone to support it, at least.
All right, we got work to do. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I think we're going to walk out of this meeting tonight. These guys are going to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that's $200,000 over default. And then we'll come back here for that December meeting and we'll hopefully have something that is palatable to everybody. So if we have no other questions, I think we can adjourn. All right, good night, everybody.